Welcome back to the Beyond the Comet podcast, where we talk about the future, technology, and the magic and mystery that it brings. As always, I'm Ahmed Iqbal, and I'm here with Cody, and we are going to get into a really interesting topic today about whether AI can and will help us talk to animals. And Cody, you actually brought this topic to my attention, and I have to say, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of things tied into it too. It's not just as easy as, we get to go talk to the animals at the local zoo.
Mhm.
There's just a lot of different reasons why it's happening. And things that have been, attempts in the past that have either failed or encouraged, people to look into, the how smart animals really are. I don't know. It's a really interesting topic, and the reason
Mhm.
why I think it's now coming back around is because of artificial intelligence, which is one of our favorite topics.
Yep.
And being able to utilize these large language models in order to apply them to different animals' speech patterns, or I mean, because they don't all. It's not all speech communication, but just communication patterns
Right.
is really interesting. You know,
It's
it-
incredibly
yeah.
interesting, and it's to me, you go in thinking, "Oh, it's I'm gonna have my dog talking to a microphone and then understand what it's trying to say," but it's so much more than that. It's, all animals out there have even read, communication that plants have, and when we talk about, as you mentioned, as you talk, it's not just the voices, it's like the body movements, vibrations, infrared, things we can't hear with our own ears, and it's the difference that AI brings, because they've been researching this forever, but the difference it brings is being able to get more information, sift through the information, and decipher it a lot better and a lot faster than we could possibly do as human beings alone.
Yeah, no, and I think that especially with the plants thing and the infrared. I did read that article, and just in how we are able to not manipulate, because it's not like GMOs, and I know they've gotten a bad rap, through genetically modified organisms, which is another way to try to increase yield of plants, but just to understand what naturally plants do, to better kind of solve the problems that we may be using Roundup or other, because we just don't know enough. We don't know enough
Mhm.
about what is naturally going on and what natural things we can utilize to increase crop production.
Right. And I think one thing that jumped out that AI does so well is pattern recognition. And that's something, especially on such a nuanced scale, like let's say a plant shifts its leaf a tiny amount or changes the color in a spectrum we can't see. That's either impossible for humans to detect, or it's so difficult to detect those patterns over a long period of time, just from a labor and effort perspective, that it just wouldn't happen without dedicating a camera or a recording device to pick up on these things.
And it even goes further than that, because a lot of these adjustments to their ecosystem, come from the ecosystem as a whole. So it's like, as the wind, like when you see like wind blowing through the grass, the patterns that they're making, but it's also like what's coming off of the plant, like why is that all happening? They've all adapted to this system, and there's just so much information within this process that I think it's impossible for us to really micro understand it. We can macro understand it, but to really get into the data, to really understand as you said, every single movement, every single part of the process will help, I think, widen the view of how ecosystems work all together.
Yeah, one of the best examples that I read about, and I'm sure you picked up this one too, but interpreting whale sounds, and we may be able to hear, and most people can have maybe heard them online or maybe in person. Just to hear that is really interesting, and maybe to detect like, oh, a whale made a sound when it came close to the boat. But then when you break it down to, they can detect which population of whales, which species of whales, and whether certain groups have a separate type of language. And then that's just what we've found out so far. But as there's more information and more analysis, you could possibly detect individual whales, individual patterns of learning. There's just so much information, as you said. And it's just, even to think about it is overwhelming. And to actually process this information by yourself as a human being, I can't imagine that it's very feasible, and it's just not tied to results as well as it could be with AI.
Yeah, no, and I think that, it's a big attempt, and I have a weird perspective on this because I think that, as I was saying, there's a lot of reasons behind trying to get communication with animals, and I think the biggest thing is for animal rights, and trying to, if you can sanction animals as having communication and being able to communicate with them, they would be able to advocate for themselves. I think that's a very strong statement to be able to make. Like, I don't even know if humans. I think the same people will care that animals can communicate. I think it would take a long time, but it's good to start that
Yeah,
process. But on the other hand, if we find out that they aren't as intelligent as we think they are, and I'm not saying you can't not do the research. I mean, you have
right.
to go this route because, one, we just have to. It's gaining more information about the world that we live in.
Mhm.
I just think that the political aspect of it, uh, it's a little risky.
Yeah, I in my notes when I was reading about that and thinking about that, I put down, do we really want to know what animals think and how they feel about things? Because I agree with you. I think a lot of people would rather just not know. Some people will say, well, I know, but I don't care. I still want to eat bacon or have a steak. But the information is going to come at some point, and the ability to find out what they're thinking, find out why, what our actions, the effect they have on them, it's going to come, and then it's a question of what do we do with the information, and that part is very interesting from the animal rights perspective. But yeah, like you said, I don't know where we're going to land.
I think with the process of stopping, and we've seen this with whales specifically.
Hmm.
They used to be hunted for their blubber in order to use it for kerosene
Hmm.
oil or lamp oil,
Hmm.
um, and other things. But it's we've switched over. Like, there's no need for that anymore. And I think with a lot of other animals, I think the solution to trying to alleviate the genocide of these animals through eating them,
Hmm.
um, or other reasons, upsetting their habitat, or there are a lot of reasons. But I think specifically for the eating one, I think it's finding an alternative to that. And I think a lot of these, like, and this is a different subject matter that we could do a whole episode on, but trying to find alternative meats, growing lab grown meats, like
Hmm.
all these. Sorry, I did quotes. I did them under the
It's
thing. There we go. Got to bring them up.
yeah.
It's a big category, but
Hmm.
I do think that what, and the group that's really heading this, or there's two groups that are really heading this, which is, and I'm gonna do a sub annoyance. SETI, which is, what the hell, man? There's
Hmm.
already a SETI. What are you doing?
Oh, right. Search for
Yes.
extraterrestrial
Well, there's a
intelligence. Yeah.
SETI, and the funny thing is, there's already a SETI with a C, because that's SETI with an S.
Yeah.
But they have a subgroup. I found there's a communication with extraterrestrial intelligence, which is a subgroup of SETI, the search for. So,
Wow.
and it's just like, why?
Yeah.
Like, they need like, first off, great group, SETI, great group. That the SETI that we're talking about is the, I don't know if I'm going to say this right.
Cetacean, is that right?
Cetacean. I like
Yeah.
this. It's kind of like Citizen, but for ocean.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I think it
Cetacean
refers to whales.
Translation Initiative.
Yeah.
What?
Specifically refers to whales. Cetacean is like the species term for whales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but if you're trying to get your word out there,
Right.
especially, and I you know what? When I Google searched SETI, they
Mhm.
came up, and I think it's because the
Uh,
other one's with S, and I put a C,
mhm.
which is nice, but still, it's like, it makes it just confusing. It's like they need a marketing manager
Yeah.
to
Maybe
kick them
AI
in the
can
head.
help with that.
What?
AI can help with that.
Yeah,
Do
hopefully.
better marketing.
But that aside,
Yeah.
I think that they're doing an amazing job. I mean, they're the ones, alongside a group called ESP, which is Earth Species Project.
Mhm.
Together, which they've been, ESP is the one that's really doing the whale translation and animal translation. They were quoted as like the Google Translate for whales.
Hmm.
So they're the ones that are really heading this, but SETI is providing a lot of assistance, and SETI has been doing a lot of this for much longer.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, I mean, like SETI's getting all this money. They're putting like just to get the data set. So I think SETI's like really adamant about getting enough data set
Hmm.
for the ability to make a translation program.
Hmm.
They said they're like microphoning the ocean floors. They've got fish, these like
Oh,
robotic
wow.
fish that swim next to the whales,
Wow.
specifically sperm whales, because that's what they said is the best chance to
Huh.
create this communication. But so they have all sort. They're tagging all the whales,
Right.
which I can't imagine the whales love that one. Um, they even said in
Well,
the article, like, we might just spend all this money to translate what the whales are saying, and they're just going to tell us to go away.
yeah.
Like,
Or
stop
get this
tagging
off my
us.
back. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Very possible. But
Yeah, like
it's
billions of
also,
dollars, and they're gonna be like, you know what? Can you just leave us alone so we can?
yeah. Well, that raises the point. Like, we want to talk to these animals. I think, there's a human rights angle or animal rights angle. Then there's also just curiosity. Like, we kind of want to know. I think every person who owns a pet is like, what is my pet thinking? What is it feeling? Does it like this toy that I gave it? Does it want to go outside? All of that. And there is just a human curiosity, like, what's going on? But we're kind of assuming that the animal actually wants to share that, actually wants to communicate, and isn't just going to be like, leave me alone. I just want to eat, you know? Um,
Yeah,
and it's also brings to light, and something else I read in the articles about, as humans, we're very self-centered, and we try to put all these communications in a human sort of language, the way we communicate. And that's limited us to this point because, as we said, we're looking for speech back and forth and how a whale sends like audio back and forth similar to us, but we're missing other things that they might be doing, other contexts that they may have, whether it's like water movement or vibrations, patterns in the water, that because we're limited in how we think, we're missing out on. And I'm hoping that through AI and more of a broad view of communication and the ability to analyze more data at the same time, whether it's vibration, infrared, all sorts of things that we can't detect at the same time, that it'll take us outside of our limited human view of communication.
yeah, no, I totally agree. That there's a bit of a mismatch between our communication. I think specifically they chose these whales because the way that they communicate, and I forget the word, but they communicate in these like collections of sounds, and they can
Mhm,
actually. There's a specific word that they use that I can't remember. I read it,
mhm.
but they can find patterns in groups. So these
Right.
groups of patterns come sequentially. So they and it just allows them, I think, to tag something as a sentence or
Mhm,
an idea, and then they can kind of focus on that.
mhm.
But that's why I was saying, like, I think that's going to be the biggest problem is that we might not get exactly what we want, and it might not be that their intelligence is the same as our intelligence, which
Mhm.
we might mismanage and say is not intelligence or is intelligence.
Yeah,
It's like just the misunderstanding, because it's like, great, you can communicate, but you're trying to map it to our conception of
right.
language, and our language was created through experience.
Mhm.
Their language was created through experience. Their experience is in the ocean, which is
Right.
completely different than our experience on land.
Yeah.
Y
I mean, even as simple of an example as if you were trying to test the intelligence of someone in France and you gave them a test in English and said, "Go ahead, fill this out." Just based on the fact that they don't understand English, you could assume, "Oh, they're not that intelligent. They haven't figured this out." So taking that to a whale, we're saying things in our language and expecting them to keep up with that language. If it's just outside of what they know, then we may not be able to perceive that. That's what I think, with more information and understanding the depth of their communication, I think hopefully we'll get a more rounded picture of that.
But I think even beyond that, like, I think that you have a better chance with somebody in France than somebody that doesn't even live on land. Because here's the thing,
Yeah,
like,
no, for sure. For
let's
sure.
say we had a match, right? And
Mhm,
I show you a match. We don't speak the same language, and I show you a
mhm,
match, and you say something, and I say, "Oh, that you just said match." But what if
Mhm.
you thought that I meant fire by showing you a match? And
Right.
that's just we both know what a match is,
Exactly. Yeah.
which is like
Exactly.
uh if you don't even there's no similar concepts. Like what they're going to be
Right.
referencing is we don't have on land.
Yeah.
Like we don't it's, so it's going to be I think the challenging part is not going to be associating terms with groups. I think it's
Mhm.
going to be identifying what those groups are.
Yeah, and that's actually something I read too, where the first level is kind of assembling all this data, which obviously SETI and other organizations are doing with all sorts of animals, kind of cataloging all these sounds. Then the second step, and that's what something AI is really good at, kind of detecting patterns, storing these like phrases or blocks of words. Then the second step is associating that with behavior and whether that's on video or measured in other ways. And then linking, like, okay, sound A was made and this penguin ran across the ice. Sound B was made and then the penguin dove in the water. And obviously that's a simplified version, but doing that enough times gives more depth to understanding the whole puzzle. And I think even just having AI do it without the human biases of this is a match, this is how I communicate fire or whatever it is, opens up the possibility that they can figure it out in a more holistic way rather than just going down the path of I'm a human, this is how we talk.
Yeah. And I guess, there are certain communications that I think that they can grasp onto, like danger, especially if they communicate that to the rest of the group around them.
Mhm.
But, I think that that one's easy because it's a warning,
Mhm.
and it's something that has a cause and effect. Um, Everything else, nuances that aren't
Yeah.
just large conceptual ideas.
Right.
Um,
Like emotions and like
like
thinking about
food
the
here,
future. Yeah.
might be one that might be able to grab onto,
Right. Right.
because when they need to basically give the entire group an advantage,
Mhm.
then that communication becomes simple because now you need an easy way to help the entire group.
Well, at the
Uh,
same time, that's still pretty amazing. Like I
it
was reading
is.
research they sent like basically what I took it to mean was like a robot bee into a hive and told them to follow or it basically gave them directions to where nectar was and it was a place the bees had never been before and once it was delivered the bees went to that location. So they were
Don't bees
able to
dance? They dance, right?
yeah, they do. That's part of their communication, which they're
Yeah.
also trying to imitate. But that's just amazing that even
Yeah.
that little bit, and they had trouble replicating it, but still, just to do that once is pretty amazing that we can do that. And as you said, with the emergency calls and saying that they're in danger, that opens up a lot of uses both to protect animals and protect humans. Because if you could drop something in the water to tell sharks, go away from this area, it's dangerous for you then you have a way to make beaches safer. If you have a way, and on the other side, if you wanted to, make fishing a lot easier, you tell the fish, "Hey, there's a lot of tasty bait here. Come this way." And then they just jump onto your boat.
So here's the issue.
Uh huh.
Now you're calling wolf. And now you're affecting their normal communication. It's a disruption of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
You, as humans, think, oh, well, we know better. We're going to tell you where to go.
Yeah.
And the instant you start doing that, now sharks no longer can trust their own communication. And now the whole communication falls apart and they start to die off because they can't trust communication between each other because the humans keep lying to them.
Yeah. There's two things. One, I know you're a big Star Wars guy, and I feel
Yeah.
like this fits. Oh, sorry, this is Star Trek, which I know the cardinal
Star
sin
Trek.
to
I am big.
compare the
I'm,
two.
I'm big in both.
Okay,
I'm not
but
one of those ones that gets in a van and starts to throw poop bags at the other.
yet,
Yeah,
but
not yet.
But I remember one thing they talk about is the not to do no harm, or basically like if you're going to see a new alien
First
species,
contact. Yeah.
yeah, you don't like meddle in their affairs. You don't change their history, even if it's beneficial to them. You don't go in there and change stuff. And I believe that, and I think there's truth in that. But at the same time, the way things are, we're messing with animals anyway. Like shipping traffic hits and kills whales all the time anyway. So all we're doing is trying to reduce the impact. It's going to we're not going to stop shipping things back and forth because whales get hit. I mean, it happens already and they'll keep happening. But if you could put something that emits a warning to the whale saying, hey, you're going to get hit if you come this direction. That's a step up. It's not ideal. There's a ton of ethics implications, but it's still better than where it is today.
But the problem is, and I agree with you if it was a scalpel, but you're doing it with a blunt object. Which is you don't really understand what the impacts are, because if you use a danger call that is a danger call for something that isn't a ship, that's like there's a
Fair.
predator out there. Now you're saying every ship is a predator. It just, without full understanding of what the conversation is actually doing to the ecosystem, it's problematic. And
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
have
saying that we shouldn't study it.
Mhm.
Using it's a different thing. I think that we continue. It's funny because this is exactly what's going on with open AI, and
Mhm.
like their products. It's like we need to study things a little bit more before we start to utilize them, because we don't know the
Yeah.
impacts of what is going to be the outcome. And I think this is the era where humans are really going to learn that lesson,
Yeah.
because we're going to start meddling in things so much that we're going to destroy them.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very fair point, but I think the temptation is going to be people seeing whale strikes, like boats hitting whales and a lot of them dying, and thinking, well, even if we have to warn them generally, like this is terrible, run away from this area, and it affects their behavior for other things, it's better than them getting hit by a boat. And the temptation will be to save them in that instance. And I completely agree with you. There's going to be other effects, other kind of side effects to come out of that, where it's going to screw up their behavior, or whales are going to leave areas where there's good food and it's safe just because they think, oh, because we heard the warning, we need to leave the area or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that, for this example that we're using about a whale getting hit by a boat,
Hmm.
it's statistical. Like when you see that whale get hit, that is one whale that is dying, rather than disrupting the entire ecosystem that will
Yeah.
possibly kill off many more whales. And also, you could say that the whale getting hit by the boat is the lesson, for the whales to stay away from the boat, but they are doing the work. They are
Right.
making the adjustment in their behaviors, rather than us forcing behaviors upon them to try to get an outcome that better suits our morality. you know
Yeah.
uh
Yeah, I'm really the whole ethics to this is really interesting because on one hand, if we're just listening to what our cat or dog has to say, it's kind of pretty harmless. It's cute, like, oh, the dog wants to go out or the dog wants food. But yeah, when you get into both listening to and communicating messages or like directives, which they have been doing already, like AI has listened to bats and then sent back like perfectly timed and perfectly stated responses to make the bats do different things. When that's happening, there's no way you're not going to affect long-term behavior. There's no way you're not going to affect a population which isn't ready for us to be talking to it.
yeah, and you know what, it's the lack of nuance.
Hmm.
That's the problem. Is, yes, we can understand on broad strokes what's going on, but we don't understand the nuance of what these communications actually mean. And I think it's going to take a while, because they live a different life. They have a different structure of language that grew out of, a different set of circumstances.
Right.
Um, it's so funny that you say the dog thing, because I just got this image of a dog taking the stand for
Yeah.
animal, right? Like it's like, and I think that eventually someone's going to try to attempt that, if we are able to communicate with them,
Oh, for
because
sure.
yeah,
For
and it's
sure.
just
I
like,
mean, I could imagine right now an animal rights group putting, a pig and a cow on a stand, like you said, and talking to people directly, like, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt my family. And I mean, that's powerful stuff. And
it is.
you have to think about like whose hands is are these abilities in, and what uses will they use them for? Because
It's
I
very
mean,
true.
I should let you respond to that because there's another topic that I have or a thought process which always happens with technology, but you respond to that first.
Yeah, no, no, no. I think I know where you're going with this.
Hmm.
But it's again, people utilizing large language models and the training of large language models to get what they want out of them.
Hmm.
Which, as we've seen with the fact that alignment in these models is very difficult. I don't know if
Hmm.
is necessarily going to happen. I think it's the thing that, as we've talked about before, is, you know, we don't even know what the large language models want to do.
Right.
But that's we've already talked about that. That's not really this
Yeah.
topic. But yeah, go ahead with your idea.
So, what happens with any technology is people look to it for economic advantage, and then there's also the military angle. And I just had this vision when I was hearing about talking to animals, communicating with them, giving them directives of different militaries across the world sending animals to do spy work, basically flying around, listening to human communications, relaying that back to us, and then recording this both visually and audio and relating to us what happened.
I don't think that this technology is going to progress fast enough for that to because there's two different technologies that coexist. There already are, mimics of animals in as
Mhm.
robotics,
Right.
and I've seen like this amazing thing with these drones that look like butterflies, and they can
Yep.
all like fly together in patterns and like do all this
Mhm.
amazing stuff. I think that that is right around the corner, and will displace this because
Mm.
the point of using an animal is it's unreliable. I mean, I don't know the statistics of carrier pigeons and how many of them actually made it to their destination.
Right.
Uh, but I'm sure, it's like, and that took a lot of training and effort. Where
Mhm.
a robot, it's 100% guarantee. You just need it to look like the thing because I think that the problem right now with drones and why
Mhm.
they will go this route of trying to disguise drones as other animals is because there are so many anti-drone uh, things out there now. I mean, there's like
Mhm.
lasers, like they just came out. I think I might have talked about this on the last podcast, but they came out with this naval ship that can shoot down drones with lasers, with
Mhm.
like high powered lasers. So it's like the anti drone technology is advancing so quickly that the next step is obviously to make it harder to tell what a drone is.
Yeah, I think what so they've already done, I'm sure where the US Navy has worked with dolphins to retrieve certain things underwater and,
Yeah,
they
I think
have
they did
some
mines, right? Like they were
yeah,
mine detectors for a while. Yeah,
detect and maybe remove mines safely.
yeah,
Um, I also think there's like an economics aspect because if you could just tell a bunch of dolphins, "Hey, go do this," this sounds. I'm not trying to diminish dolphin lives to just numbers, but it's basically free. You could just herd wild dolphins, tell them to do something for you, and they'll do it, and you don't have to go through all the development. So I agree that there is technology already that may take this over, but I think that it just raises the point anytime you have a powerful technology like communicating with animals or you know um, I feel like it just opens the door for nefarious things.
I guess so. The issue in today's world is it's a very big political risk to do. And a lot of these things happen with military uses of animals happen before, not before, but I mean, I don't think that the amount of leaking. I mean, there was just the whole thing in Ukraine troops got leaked, and so I just don't.
Mhm.
It's like I think that there's so many checks and balances just through transparency and the way that technology is forcing transparency upon all structures, systems. I don't know if they would want to go this route because it looks terrible if a bunch of animals are getting killed to do covert operations for the military. It just I don't why not just use robots? It has no political issues. I mean, other than take over if they wanted to take over regions of people, but
Yeah,
forced inhabitants or whatever.
yeah,
We talked about this in another episode. If there's a
right,
robot on every single corner, then that's also a problem.
right.
Would be martial law. That's what I was looking for. Martial law.
Yeah,
Thank
there you go.
you. And yeah, no, I think that hopefully the animals are safe, and hopefully through a lot of this communication things, because if they can talk to each other, that might protect them as a whole.
Mhm.
I don't know, and we won't know like what abilities they have, but I think that's our best route rather than trying to control them is just
Yeah.
trying to understand them. And
No, I think that's definitely I mean, the wisest move in any issue, any problem you're dealing with is understand the topic first and then act. The
yeah,
thing I think AI is showing us, and especially the rapid advancement, is it's really easy to just act and then figure it out later. And as we both are kind of worrying about, the figuring it out later may be problematic when you're dealing with such a powerful technology. And especially with, my mind just races with all the different things that could even come out of this, like animals, us first being able to understand and talk to animals. But imagine like it's not just limited to that. Like what communications could be developed if an octopus could communicate with your dog? What sort of like networking, what sort of like additional knowledge would be created from that? And who knows?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of deep ocean,
Mhm.
life, and just the ocean in general. I mean, obviously we've gained a lot more depth into the subject matter.
Nice.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot more to learn, and if we can start to communicate with at least the and I'm just saying this is where they're starting was a sperm whale, which is considered
Mhm.
a smart one of the smarter uh, ocean animals that exists. Um, if we can start communicating with them, it might open the door into our understanding of that entire ecosystem, and maybe we can find ways to help, support and secure it.
Mhm.
Uh, but I just, to try to do this for animal rights, and I'm going to impress this again. I think it's not going to work out. I just think that the same problems are still there. Like we as humans are damaging these ecosystems not because we don't care about the animals. It's because we want the resources or the things. We want life to be the way we want. It's an
True.
economic problem, not a morality problem.
At the same time, I think additional information, which is I think something we completely agree on, more information is positive. It does affect people's decision making. When people find out like this animal feels pain or this one does not, it clearly affects whether they're going to purchase food of one type or another. And yeah, you could raise the issue like if we find out later that all plants feel some sort of pain, are we just going to stop eating everything? Obviously, that's not going to happen. But using that information, things may be done differently, whether it's with animals or with plants. So it may not be that we stop 100% eating meat, but maybe we change the conditions that animals are living in, or eat less meat, or just make decisions based on the knowledge that animals not just feel pain, but have certain feelings or emotions attached to it. Might change our actions, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, on that pain thing, I think that's one of the recent articles I read. Is that plants scream
I
like
did hear that. Yeah,
yeah, like
which is
when they get
terrifying.
injured, they scream. So
Right.
and this is an infrared scream, so that's I think the infrared thing again. But
Hmm.
if I remember the article correctly,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think that the problem is, as you said, if there are other options. You said we might make choose a different option if we knew if there is another option. And it's almost like the options have to be of equal value in order for us to make that shift. Yeah, of course. If they're the same, like if it's the same to choose this and this, like it's okay, whatever, I'll save the animals. But
Hmm.
if the animals are much more valuable than the other option, I don't see people switching their
Yeah,
lifestyles.
but even the fact that even that consciousness, I think it has value. Even if you still do the same act, you still order the burger. If you're just conscious, like, okay, and this is maybe like more, you might say hippie or just like high minded, but I still think there's a difference in accepting, like, okay, an animal that had feelings that can communicate with me died so I can have this. So I'm not just going to scarf it down. I'm going to value it and appreciate it. I think there's a difference between that and saying like it's just a dumb protein source. I think in how we go through life and how we go through treating them, I think it does make a difference.
And you know what? I would be wanting to switch, but again, I see the world in statistics,
Hmm.
and in statistics, there's just a certain amount of people that would already switched without needing to know that the animals
Yeah.
are smart. You're already when you're born and you grow up and the situations that affect you, if it's nurture or nature, you are a statistic. You enter into a category of human that will act and do a certain thing. It
Hmm.
doesn't change. You're not going to, I don't think you can. I mean, maybe there are some fence on the fence statistic people that,
Hmm.
you can kind of sway them left and right. And that's the portion that you're going after. But there are definitely people you're never going to change,
For
and
sure. For sure.
unless it's such an obvious choice,
Hmm.
then you get big change. You get like, because it's a value system. People aren't willing to compost. They don't want to take the time to compost. But if there's a machine that looks like a trash can and automatically composts for you and
Right.
does everything for you, and it takes no more effort to use that machine than it would to throw it in the trash,
Hmm.
now everybody moves over because it's like, why not, right? Like, you're like, it
Right.
doesn't, I don't have to do anything. Or when we get robots, if you just have to tell your robot to compost,
Right. No,
then why not? Why not compost?
I agree with you, but I think even that process of trying to figure out like a mechanism so that it can be implemented, I think that needs to start with information.
You're
And
right.
I think I've already written out a proposal for how we communicate with animals. First, we listen, like
Yeah.
exclusively just listen to them, collect that information, then get to the step of understanding. And this, I mean, it's impossible to fully understand something, but to a certain degree of comfort. And only then do we start talking to them, because by that point, hopefully, some of that nuance that you were talking about has been figured out. And so we're not just giving them blunt instructions to do, things that we haven't thought about the consequences of. And I think that general approach of listening, understanding, and then acting will maybe not make this process seamless or easy, but reduce a lot of the stress and bumps from it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I'm always pro science. Like, if it's pure science and pure science oriented, um, and you're going through, and making sure that you're doing, your ethical study, your studies are ethical,
Mhm.
and you're just trying to find out more information. Great. I will support you. It's there's just so many agendas, and I think that this has to be an agenda free field, because I think there's a
Mhm.
lot to gain. I think there's a lot to recognize and understand. It's really, understanding how our effects are happening on these ecosystems.
Yeah, and
And
even the aspect of like what specifically we have to gain beyond what you mentioned with animal rights, it's also conservation of animals. Like if you found out why they're moving areas or why they're leaving a certain area, or what type of trees would bring them back to an area, or what sort of things we can do to encourage a species growth or keep us away from dangerous species. There's a ton of information that can help both humans and the animals that kind of support the whole ecosystem. And I think that listening and that knowledge, it's only going to increase exponentially if we can tap into AI to figure this stuff out.
yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here because
Hmm.
I love the idea of, the nobility of first world countries.
Hmm.
um, because it just, it doesn't play out as well when you leave that first world dynamic. When you get into countries that are just trying to survive and people that are just trying to survive in a world economy that's running way faster than them, so they're just cutting down rainforests, so that they
Hmm.
can have more cows to support the economy that's trying to buy cows from them or whatever. That's
Right.
a terrible, but it happens all over the world.
Hmm.
Um, it takes a lot, it takes a lot to
For
stop
sure.
that. And I just read or listened to a podcast about the rainforest, and one of their points is, why aren't, because there's all this like rainforest tourism and all this stuff which is helping, but really we should be paying them not to destroy the rainforest,
Right.
rather than saying, hey, you're going to get not very, because a lot of times the money doesn't even go to the population of that country. It
Hmm.
goes to the people that have that created the tourism system,
Hmm.
which may not even be part of that country. They may be
Hmm.
other, people that just decided to make this place, got the contracts to be able to explore these sanctuaries that
Hmm.
are deemed, non-touch, or I don't know how to say it, but where
Protected.
yeah, protected. Thank you.
Hmm.
Um, so the actual people that live there, and this happens a lot in Africa for a lot of the safari land.
Hmm.
Um, but there has to be an incentive for the people to say like, hey, well, we need to make a living, so we should really just be paying them to not destroy the rainforest, and that would probably be the best way to create, because if they're making more money from not destroying the rainforest than destroying the rainforest.
Right. It's pure economics. Yeah, I get that. But I think when I say conservation and communicating and learning through these animals and different ecosystems, I think you can target better. So even if it is that, we're going to pay you to stop, that's like I see that as a specific strategy. But in order to decide where you deploy that strategy, I think you can gain a lot from learning. For example, they might be spending millions of dollars to protect a certain area of land that, after talking to the animals, they don't want that anyway. It's not the fact that it's deforested, it's just not at the right climate, for example. And so by learning that, you can target and say, okay, you know what? The elephants really love this pocket. So even though it's already forested, we're just going to work on protecting that rather than spend all our resources on an area they don't want to go anyway.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. Because there's going to be some other animal that, then what? The smartest animals that are able to communicate get the rights, and the ones that
That's
can't
that's the world
communicate.
right now, right?
Yeah. Well, no, because they're all, yes, of course, that's, but I think that it all needs to be protected. I mean, we need to look at this more as, how would the Earth be if there were no humans, and try to simulate that in certain amounts of areas. Because obviously we're not going to leave the planet, so we need to create these protected areas and stop indigenous people from destroying them in order to make their living. It,
I get
it's a
what you're
very
saying.
sticky problem, right? It's
Yeah,
super
it's
hard
sticky.
because
Yeah.
it's great, but yes, I agree with you. More information can't hurt, and it will probably help. And I would say that the more information we have on how animals interact with their ecosystem will help mobilize maybe money towards that area. Because
Mhm.
if you can say, well, the elephants or the whales or any of these deemed pseudo smart um,
Mhm.
animals. And I don't mean that they're not smart. I just mean that as of now, we think of them as the smartest of animals, which
Right.
they may end up being smarter than us. Who knows? We don't really know, but right now, that's
Yeah.
kind of the way they're seen,
Yeah.
as a step down from the human race, but yet still smart in their own category.
Right. I like how you said that, just in case we have elephant listeners in the near
Hey,
future
man, I
that you're
don't,
not gonna insult.
dude, I don't want to mess with. And plus, I love animal. Elephants are my favorite animal. So
Oh,
I love the elephants, and they're awesome.
good.
But yeah, it's I think that it'll help kind of bring money to these causes.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if it's going to stop anybody unless it's. I
It's
think it's just an
progress.
economic
It's
thing.
not about, like, to me, it's not about fixing it right away or even 100% fix. It's progress. I think, and I don't think we're disagreeing. It's, again, to say it's just more information is gonna help target the efforts better, and why not learn from the animals that are living there if we're able to? And I think that's what I'm hopeful, one thing that I'm hopeful that AI can help us do in the future.
Yeah, yeah, no. I don't know if I want to talk to my dogs.
I was gonna ask, maybe this is a good time to ask since we're close to
uh,
wrapping up, but what do you think your dogs would say if they could talk?
I'm hungry. I mean, they already talk enough, so it's like, I don't need an argument for what they want. I already know
Right.
what they want. It's like,
Mhm.
uh, but
You
it's,
wouldn't feel more empowered if they said, like, "You know what? Last week's dog food was way better than this. Get a new bag."
well, what are they going to drive? I guess if the car can drive itself and they can go to
No,
the
no, they're
store.
asking you. They're requesting, "Cody, I didn't like
Oh,
the
they're asking
lobster."
me to go get a new bag. I thought I
Right.
was asking them to go get a
No,
new
no,
bag.
no. Yeah,
Now, see, that might be good if we have self-driving cars. I could just be like, and then they go to the store. They said, "1 bag, please."
yeah. That's
Carry it
that's the
home.
future. Yeah.
But you can train dogs. People have been trained dogs to get stuff out of the refrigerator. They tie the
Mhm.
towel to the
Mhm.
refrigerator door, and then they, through training.
Right.
I do think that if we can communicate with them, there are a lot of situations as a dog owner where you don't know, either you don't know what they want, whether they go to the bathroom. Like, we have 3 dogs, and they're of different sizes. So I end up taking them to the bathroom a lot because the smallest one will go to the bathroom if you don't constantly take her out of the bathroom. So I might as well take
Mm.
them all. Uh,
Mhm.
if she could tell me, or I could communicate, like, if you tell me you have to go to the bathroom, um,
Right.
and there are ways around this. Like, there are the people train their dogs to ring bells on um,
Mhm.
on their door in order to indicate that they want to go to the bathroom. But then the dog can easily use that to just want to go outside.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, there might be a benefit through having a little bit of a closer understanding of what they need, and then also
Oh,
if they
for
can
sure.
understand what you're trying to do or what you want, in the situation.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think it's also, thinking about it in the blunt terms that you're saying, like, do you need to go eat? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Like 2 or 3 symbols, the 2 or 3 signals versus the nuance you're talking about in the future where, oh, I you can reply to your dog and say, like, "Look, you don't really need to go to the bathroom, you just wanna play. Just quiet down, I'll be there in 10 minutes." If you could actually express that with that level of nuance and the kind of attitude that goes behind it, that's a different conversation that you're having than the basic, "You need to go out, ring the bell. You need to come in, ring the bell." That sort of thing.
yeah, but my problem actually, I'm going to bring back to what you said
Mhm.
before. Is now, are we going to enter into a situation where those behaviors are forced upon the dog?
Mm.
I want you to go to the bathroom, so I don't even need to say anything. Why don't I just push a button and it sends the right neural signals in your brain to force you to do what I want you to do? And then
Yeah,
basically you have a robot, and then you like, what's the point of having a dog? But like, of course, it would be a
right.
dog when it wasn't being forced to do things.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay,
Man,
well, it's
that's
like,
a
okay,
whole
I'm gonna go
different
into
area.
I'm gonna go into manual mode, and then you just
Yeah.
like you go to, and then you could just like use a joystick to move the dog around. And it's like,
Wow.
well, great, what are we doing?
Yeah, no, I feel like that's a whole series of episodes right there. Bionic dogs and controlling them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's twisted or good, but I think there'd be a lot of people who could just choose, like, I just want to take a nap. I'm going to turn off my dog for a second or go into standby mode. And then when I wake up, I'll take care of it.
Yeah, well, I think that these communications with AI and AI being able to, what's to not strap electrodes to the
Mhm.
brain, and then uh to get more information and like more understanding, and then it gets sticky, man. It's like
Yeah.
everything gets sticky when you go
And
too
it takes away,
far.
like, the free will and the nature of the animal, where it's no like you said, it's no longer an animal with, like, a choice and doing erratic things. It's does exactly what it's supposed to, like a robot,
So
which
hopefully
is
we'll
not
have
great.
robots to fill that void before animals become robots. But yeah, it's crazy, man. It's
Yeah, yeah. The
but
mind goes through hoops. So, that was
yeah.
a good introduction, I think. I'm sure we'll revisit this because it's a really interesting topic that I think there's a lot still to discuss, but, that was good.
Yeah.
Um,
All
so
right.
thanks for listening and watching our podcast, and, we'll be back next week with another episode. See you then.
Thank you.